Welcome back to the Female Property Expert Podcast. It's your go-to source of information for all things property investment, really. I'm thrilled to welcome back Jamie Clutterbuck from Bucks Property Services. You might remember Jamie from a previous episode, which was back in May, but Jamie joins us with years of experience in the property industry, brings a wealth of knowledge and also insight into the current state of the property market. But today we're going to be discussing kind of market conditions over the past year, an insight from the experience and prediction maybe of the future. It's quite difficult to predict the future, but have an understanding of where it's tracking. So without further ado, welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us again. It would be a good idea to understand the overview of how the property market has fared over the last 12 months, I suppose, in your area. I know you operate in the home counties, but it'd be good to have an overview.
Yeah, I think two ways of approaching this question, I guess. One is from what we're seeing and feeling, and one of the other is from a stats point of view. If you're looking at from a stats point of view, then house prices are 3% down year on year on last year's figures. However, I would say as we sit here today, prices are improving and increasing. So I think that we took a bit of a hit last year, 2023. But I think it's now starting to turn around a little bit and we're starting to see prices starting to rise. Rightmove have released this week that prices are up 1.5% month on month. Would tend to make us believe that we've hit the bottom and we're on the way back up.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
I think, yeah, it would be lovely. I think if you looked at how it's feeling, I think this year, since January, has felt busier. Most of last year was spent talking about the interest rates. Now, most people are thinking that they are where they are and they're not going to improve anytime soon or improve much anytime soon. The general feeling is people are now, if they need to move, they're going to move. And that people seem to be getting on with it a little bit now.
Yeah.
So the overall feel, I guess, now is that we've come out of the storm or started to come out of the storm and we're headed towards slightly smoother waters.
Perfect. Just in time for buying up all those property.
Exactly.
I suppose over time as well, you've seen different trends or changes in buyer demand. But I wonder if, I know we spoke previously in the previous episode about buyer demand being more around outside space and home working conditions, that sort of thing, like a little office space under the stairs or an outside office. Yeah. What sort of trends have you observed from them regarding their demands? So when they're actually going through the buying process, is there any particular demands? You know, I want the developer to pay stamp duty, or is there anything that you see from that point of view?
I think it's when you're selling new homes, it's a different game really to selling second-hand homes. So I think that's why historically we tend to see new homes agents selling more effectively developments than an office that might be market leaders but haven't the experience in selling new homes as such. So I think when you're selling to someone who's buying a new home,
yeah,
the easiest thing I suppose to describe is that the best way of selling it to a buyer is to say that you're buying directly from a developer. This isn't an emotional move for the developer, and therefore the only thing they're looking at is how much money they're going to be making from it. And I think if you can get that in early enough, then that takes out any preconceptions of having a huge price reduction from a new build home. If you're advising someone on how to buy a second-hand property, that can be different because hopefully whatever the price reduction you might be able to achieve, the seller might be able to then use moving forward in their next purchase. So it's a very different thing. So to answer your question, I suppose, is demand-wise, it's generally all around the price. People are really wanting to push the price and lower, and I think it's our job to kind of correct things a little bit. The market isn't as bad as people might read, and therefore a stupid offer won't be accepted.
Yeah.
I think sometimes developers get a little bit desperate towards the end of sites on bigger sites and tend to offer lots of different incentives. But generally speaking, my advice to people is the market isn't as bad as you might read. Therefore, don't be too silly with your offer.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you can manage that, then it works. I think in terms of incentives, we don't really see lots of incentives from a developer's point of view. I don't necessarily think that people will buy a property based on free carpets being offered. I think if they're going to buy, they're going to buy. And it would just be a bonus. So we tend not to get too involved in offering incentives or suggesting incentives unless it's really meaningful. And I think at the end of the day, people would rather have a price reduction than a £5,000 furniture package or something like that added to it.
Yeah, I think that's changed quite a lot, hasn't it? Coming into the last sort of 2 to 3 years, because I know when I first started in the development world, it was very much incentive driven, and being able to sort of, not just the stamp duty, pay your stamp duty, but we could throw in some furniture, or we'd landscape everything for you, or whatever it might be. But it was quite incentive driven. But that has changed now, definitely. There's definitely a feel where there's not as many incentives. And I think maybe that's because there's been cost, we're cost conscious as developers with prices going up on materials, labor, and that sort of thing, that we probably don't have the same flexibility. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because
I think from my point of view, we have a lot of buyers that want to get the best deal possible, obviously. And I get that. But from my point of view, I always say to people, if this is the right property for you and you can make it work financially, and this is the one that you want, then don't squabble over 2 or 3 grand, because you could lose it. In the grand scheme of things, that 2 or 3 or 5 grand isn't going to be important in 15 years' time. If it's going to be a home you live in and it's the right home, then just go and buy it. And I think if you can kind of talk to people sensibly in that way, I always think that I'm not trying to sell a property to anyone. If someone wants to buy a property, they're going to buy it.
Yeah.
My job is to make sure they're informed about what they're buying and make sure that it's the right move for them as much as anything. And I think that kind of consultancy-led selling is the way that estate agents should operate, rather than it being the old-fashioned hard sell, because it just doesn't work. People don't want it anymore.
No, I think people are wise to it, aren't they? Definitely. And it's not something I could work with as a developer from a sales side either.
No, I just believe in being normal and speak to people normally and give them advice. And if they don't, you're not going to sell someone a home unless they want to buy a home. It's just not, and I think giving good advice is the key.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So, I mean, you've worked with us in the past, and there's definitely been elements where you've said to us, actually the price has gone down, you need to be realistic, you need to drop by £5,000 at least, or, in those conversations, you're like, oh, okay, fine, we'll look at doing that. And it's not just because the market's dropped. It might be because there's a change in buyer pattern or whatever it could be, or there's an increase in interest and the mortgages can't be achieved for that particular figure. Stamp duty affects a certain figure, those sorts of things. And it's being wise to that, and being, I suppose, as an agent, for me, it's being able to speak up and say that and be.
I think the easiest thing for an agent to do with a developer or a home seller is to talk about price reductions. And so lots of estate agents, I won't name any names, but lots of estate agents will be incentivizing staff to look at price reductions. So they'll be looking at the number of price reductions that they can hit in a month. Now, for me, firstly, the property should have been priced correctly originally, because then it might have sold already. And if the market has changed since it was launched, then that's different. But I think that it's very easy to just drop prices and then you'll sell it. If someone offered me a house for £1, I'd buy it, right? If some same house was £1 million, I might not. I definitely wouldn't. I had a call with a developer yesterday and he said, look, we need to sell this last plot. Do we need to do a price reduction? My answer could have and probably should have been, yeah, let's reduce it. But I didn't. I think it's the right price. And I think we'll sell it at that price. So I advised him not to change the price. And I think rather than just jumping straight in and suggesting price reductions, an agent should be working with the seller to maximize what they're going to achieve for it. An agent will know whether the house is priced correctly or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's too easy sometimes for people just to reduce the price to get it sold. And that's not necessarily in the best interest of the seller.
No. So have you noticed a notable shift in the types of properties that are being sold, or actually, no, not necessarily the types, more the location of them? Because I know that when COVID hit for me, I lived in the countryside already, but I was like, actually, I like living in the countryside. I just don't like living it in Bucks because it was so bloody expensive. I want to move to Devon. And within like a few years that I've made that move. So have you seen a change, or are you seeing that change now where more people want to move out of sort of crowded towns to the outskirts?
So based in South Bucks, where I am, obviously fairly close to London. I don't have the facts in front of me, but at one point there was a lot of migration out of London into the countryside around COVID, just after COVID. House prices around here obviously very, very high. So I think if means allow, then yeah, people are tending to try and move away from the city or indeed out of town. But it's difficult really, I suppose, because I live in the country outside of a town. For me, the obvious thing was to do exactly that. And I didn't want to bring my daughter up in the town centre, so we moved to the countryside. But not everyone can afford to do it, I guess.
No, that's very true. Not everyone can.
You know, I don't think I can really, but I've managed to. And it's difficult. My parents, again, they live in Oxfordshire. They're looking to move close this way. And, you know, they're now in their early 70s and they would rather be in the countryside, but need to be close enough to shops and things like that. And so it's a difficult one. I think the main thing we struggle with, even moving from Oxfordshire into Buckinghamshire, the price difference is huge. So, you know, a large 4-bedroom detached house over there might be selling for 700 grand, and over here you'd buy a flat for 700 grand. So it's difficult.
It's
I think that move to the countryside is one that people are looking to make if they can afford to, really, to answer your question.
Yeah, there's definitely I wonder if it's an age thing as well, whether the younger, you know, Gen X type environment want to be in towns and cities, and the older from my age range,
I was going to say,
they like to be out of that environment now and in a much more kind of, you know, walk your dogs around a field and have a slower pace of life.
I think that's why I struggle to answer your question, really, because I'm there. I'm the one that doesn't want to live in the city anymore, and I do want to be in the countryside. So I look after an area of London in the recruitment world, and living in East London for me would be horrendous. I'd hate it. I couldn't live there. I wouldn't want to, and I'm quite happy out walking the dog in the field, like you say.
I wonder if that's more of an age thing as opposed to a mindset thing, I suppose, rather than just seeing the change in buyers. I think it's probably as you get older, you see more of a change. Yeah. I know that my daughter, she's 17 this year, and she's very much a case of, I want to live in the middle of nowhere with no one around me with a 2-mile driveway. She wants to live on the local bus route 10 minutes from town. And I'm like, oh God, how's that going to work? So
you have to buy a car.
Yeah. But it's difficult, definitely, I think, trying to balance the two. And I find that the older you get, hopefully, if you brought wisely, you become a little bit more financially solvent. So you can afford to make slightly bigger jumps to the countryside where it may be more expensive. I think the younger generation don't have those opportunities as much. Certainly my daughter's era won't have those opportunities as much.
Right.
Because of the cost. By the by, I wonder what kind of strategies you've had to adopt to kind of adapt in that changing market condition through COVID, coming back out of COVID now. Is there anything in particular that you've had to change in your processes or the ways in which you manage people, the sellers, the buyers?
Ultimately, again, it goes back to what we've said previously about building relationships. That's the key thing to it. If you can talk sensibly to people and people trust you, then you're going to be able to sell houses or help people to buy houses. Around that, though, there's been a few things that are changing in what we do marketing wise. So social media now is quite a big thing for estate agents. And I think if you look on LinkedIn, for example, or even on Facebook to a certain degree, if you see an agent that is just talking about their latest instruction, they're never going to sell a house on LinkedIn. They're never going to sell a house on Facebook, probably. But it's all about, for me, social media needs to be around building the relationship with the local area. And so a good agent would look to sponsor the local football team or to be involved in fate or to talk about conditions locally on social media rather than just talk about the latest house that they've got on to sell. And I think that engagement with the local area will be beneficial for the agent, but also will show the potential vendor or buyer that this agent knows the local area, and they also almost become the go-to person in that area. In a similar way that we became the go-to new homes agent in our area. If you've got a very strong agent selling second-hand homes, then you'd want that agent to know about the local area, be based in the area, be a part of the area, and everyone to know them.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but I think that relationship's important. I've got a client based in North London who have been around for kind of 30, 40 years. He told me the other day he produces a printed almost newsletter monthly that goes out hand delivered to 12,000 people in the local area. Now, we would all sit and say print media is dead, ridiculous thing to do, it's really expensive, don't bother. But he's been doing it for so long that people, they very much see him and his agency as the go-to local agent. And he clears up there. He's got a huge market share. And he thinks it's largely based around that, because everyone that lives there knows him and knows his story and knows the leaflet and knows everything about everything in that area. And so for me, doesn't need to necessarily be hugely modern things that we're doing or innovative things. It just needs to be being placed well in the local market.
So you're saying that we may be going, the old fashioned techniques might be coming back into play alongside social media?
For me, maybe it's because I'm old, but for me, it's got to be about the relationship. All those things that you can do to be part of the community are going to help an agent sell and help people buy in that area.
Yeah, I suppose so. You're building your community trust, aren't you?
Yeah.
And also
and I
your
think,
brand is in front of everyone.
Exactly. Forget the branding for a minute. I just think it's kind of, and again, I'm coming at it from a new house point of view, but I would know everything that's going on in my area from a new homes point of view, everything. I'd know the pricing. I'd know who's building. I'd know when it's going to be built. I'd know everything about everything to do with new homes. If you've got an agent doing the same thing in second-hand homes, they know what's coming to the market, what everything's been sold at, who might be looking to sell if they get the right buyer, who's looking to move out of the area, who wants to move into the area. Then they've almost got a black book of people that if you go to them and say, look, we really want to move to the area, we want a 4-bed detached house on that road there, then a good agent probably has the phone number of someone that in the next 6 months might want to move.
Yeah.
And I think that local knowledge is what sets good agents apart for me.
Yeah, that's someone who knows the area and the industry very well.
Yeah.
And has a very good understanding of the community. We used to work with an agent. He's still an agent now, but he was and still is very good at what he does, because he knows, even from drinking down in the local pubs, to going to the cricket matches, to his children being part of a swimming club. Like, he knows so many people in the community that he's almost referred. Oh, yeah,
Exactly.
yes, so help me sell my house. And it's like referred work, as opposed to, he does do the social media side of things, but it's interesting to see how that's going back to old ways, the old techniques, which I personally think are brilliant. I don't think we should change the old techniques. I think the old fashioned way of building a rapport, keeping that knowledge, keeping the ability to be present in a community, but without actively selling in a community, are all really valuable traits to have. But the sales market tends to lose it quite quickly, especially in larger organizations.
Exactly. So one of my businesses that I don't think we've talked about fully yet, it's a new business that I put together in the new homes market. So lots of local agents don't know how to sell new homes. And my new business essentially partners with independent local agents to help them win business, help them market the new homes properly, them do the selling. So the reason behind that business really has come about because I see the benefit of having a local agent selling, because they know the local area, they know the local people, they know who's looking for what, but they don't have the expertise to sell new homes or to win the business in the first place.
Yeah.
So the key thing for me, selling houses as I said just now, isn't difficult. It's not rocket science. You just need to build good relationships and be decent people that know the area. And for me, that's the key to a good agency. And that's how I would choose an agent. You can't base your decision on who to use on price. You have to look at it from a stats point of view and who's going to give you the best service. And I think that could be different in different areas, right? So if you're in Canary Wharf, that agent might not need local knowledge. But if you're selling a house in, I don't know, in the countryside, somewhere in a village, then for me, the local knowledge is going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Jamie. I appreciate coming back on and chatting to us and for sharing more of your knowledge and insight into the actual property markets. And it's interesting to hear a different take on it in the sense of potentially going back to the traditional ways, which I love, but it's quite interesting to hear that. Now, over the next few episodes, we're going to talk about various different things from insurance, lettings, all the way through to actual, should you rent your house or should you sell your house, and giving you some tips and tricks around that. So stay tuned. And until next time, happy investing.